Where's Michael Misa playing this season and why it's becoming very clear it's going to be San Jose?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be exploring the Michael Misa ELC saga, where we are at, why it's becoming very clear where he's going to be spending the 25-26 season, and kind of what's the holdup and plan behind that. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right. Michael Misa, famously the Sharks' second overall pick in the draft this year, after much consternation and worry about the Sharks maybe screwing this up and picking somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. The Sharks, they get Michael Misa, right? And now with Misa, right, the big decision is, well, where does he play this year? And this is something I wrote about for my blog, The Reef. We usually cover prospects, but we talk about the Sharks in general over there, and you can find it at The Reef, or all my socials. You can find it there as well. But still, so I wrote about this last week, but I wanted to kind of dive into it a little bit more on today's episode because it's training camp's right around the corner, guys. Like, you're gonna start to see captain skates here. We're already seeing guys start to kind of head back home head back home or leave their home. Anyway, start to head back to the Bay here rather soon as we start gearing up for training camp. And one of the big questions, of course, this season is, well, what do you do with Michael Misa, the second overall pick in this year's draft? So let's start with where he's not playing this year. Because it's easy to kind of work your way to why I think he's eventually just going to play for the Sharks this season. So, first, he's not eligible to play in the AHL, which would, make some sense if you wanted to try to transition him. But unfortunately, he's just not eligible. And for players who coming from the CHL, right, guys who played in the Q, guys who played in the OHL, guys who played in the WHL, there are rules for how old and how many, et cetera, to play in the AHL. And just easiest way is you have to have 4 years of service in your respective junior league. So even though Michael Misa is an exceptional status player who got to play in the OHL early, he only has 3 years. So 3 years of OHL service. The other rule is you have to be 20 before January, I believe it's January 15th of that season. So Luca Cagnoni, who, famously 19 to start last year, he was able to get in and play in the AHL last year because even though he'd only played for 3 seasons in the W, his age, he was born in December, he turned 20 in December, he was eligible to play. Michael Misa doesn't turn 19 until February next year. So his age is out. Like, he's not eligible to play it. Same rules why Sam Dickinson isn't going to be able to play in the AHL this year as well, right? Dickinson also only has 3 years of service, and he doesn't turn 20 until June next season. So, and since Sam Dickinson's already signed his entry-level contract, the new rules that allow players to transfer from the CHL to the NCAA and NCAA to the CHL, he was part of the old guard and isn't eligible to play in college because he's already signed his entry-level contract. So Misa not eligible to play in the AHL. Would make a lot of sense if you were worried about him maybe not making the jump right away. Let him spend the season in the AHL, et cetera, et cetera. But the first kind of big option for him would be to play in college. And since, again, he has not signed his entry-level contract, he is eligible to play in college. But this is looking less and less likely because, well, colleges are getting started. Like, students are, heading back to college as of like this weekend, right? I know like Boston College, their move in is this weekend. Like you see, like Penn State, they've already had their players there doing all their, the photo ops and stuff like that. Michigan, the same thing. Like all these big time schools, they're getting their, especially the athletes, back on campus now because, granted, you're there to play hockey, but you're also a student, right? You're a student athlete. And yes, Michael Misa, if he went to college, he's only going to spend 1 year in college before turning pro, but you still got to like go to school and like do that stuff, right? And if Michael Misa was going to school, and whatever school it is, and I think Penn State would make a lot of sense because one, his brother Luke Misa goes there, and two, you get to play with Gavin McKenna, which would be ridiculous. Could you imagine the 2026 first overall pick, projected first overall pick in Gavin McKenna, and the 2025 second overall pick in Michael Misa playing on the top line together? Sorry, Reese LeBach. Reese LeBach's going to get to play with Gavin McKenna all season, which is ridiculous. But like, you're right. These kids are already showing up for college. And of course, Michael Misa is not, because he's not going to school, right? And you could probably figure out a way to do it and stuff, but if Michael Misa was going to school, he would have already, like, we would have known, right? This wouldn't be some secret. He's not just going to show up at like, Boston University and be like, hey guys, I'm going to school now. Like, you guys didn't know, right? Or like Boston College or Michigan or wherever he was going to go to school. That wouldn't just show up at like the day before, like a couple weeks before the season starts. Like, you have to actually go to school there. Like, you can't just show up mid-season, like mid-semester and be like, hey guys, I'm going to school here now. Where's the rink, right? So it's pretty clear that Michael Misa is not going to go to college unless it's like literally sometime this week where he announces like, hey, here's the plan. I'm going to school X, Y, and Z. We're getting, we're basically, like, I'm gonna have to crash my courses, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we're getting it worked out, but whatever NIL money, et cetera, is getting taken care of. Like, it's a lot harder now to just, like, go, especially as these top athletes and with the NIL money. Like, these kids are getting paid to go to college, and somebody would have to pay Michael Misa a fair amount of money to go to their school. I mean, I don't know if Misa's family, I assume Misa's family doesn't have like an alma mater that they're all like, yeah, like Will Smith, like you knew Will Smith was going to Boston College since he was, his family's from Boston College. Like, they didn't have to pay Will Smith to go to Boston College. Like, he was going to go to Boston College because his family's like gung-ho Boston College kids, right? Michael Misa doesn't really have like a dog in the fight. So he's probably going to go to who's ever going to give him the biggest NIL deal, to be fair, right? Or wherever he thinks he's going to win, and then the NIL money will follow up. And again, like, that stuff doesn't just happen. There has to be, like, that's kind of some of the dealing and negotiating and, like picking your school, et cetera, is, with the new look of college athletics, who's going to pay me for my services? And if Michael Misa is a legitimate top line center on basically any program in, like, if he walks in as your number one C basically at any program, because Misa's really good. Like, even if he went to Boston College, where James Hagan, I think Misa's the one C, even though Hagan's already played a year. Like, Misa would be the 1C at basically any school, because he's Michael Misa. So it's pretty clear. Like, Misa's not right, can't play in the AHL. And if he's not going to college, because if he was going to college, we would have known. He would have already announced like, hey, I'm going to school here, right? Here's all my NIL money. I'm going to be majoring in, whatever type of thing for a year. General education while I, go to school and play hockey and take care of my classes, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the holdup? Why isn't he just signed his ELC? Because we know he's probably going to play with the Sharks, right? It's either Sharks or the OHL. So we're going to get to that here in just 1 second. College football is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than the energy of tailgates, being in the stands with your fellow fans. The only downside, trying to get tickets, endless queues, hidden fees, and prices that jump at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. It's great. Like my wife just used it to go see Backstreet Boys in Vegas. She got great seats, amazing prices, and she had an absolute blast living out a 30-year dream of going to see one of her all-time favorite bands. So not only concerts, shows, games, whatever, Game Time has got you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, guys, before we continue, I do have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast like this one, or maybe I'm your least favorite podcast, even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for helping us out. Okay. So, right, not going to AHL, can't. Not going to college because, again, like colleges are starting right now. What's the holdup? Why not just sign your ELC? That's where it becomes a little trickier right now because you have to look at where the Sharks are at with their contracts and kind of the slide rule and where everyone is projected. So as of right now, the Sharks have 51 contracts, NHL contracts. You're only eligible to have 50. So the Sharks are over one, but you can slide. So if you don't know how to slide, if you sign your contract when either you're 18 or 19 and you don't play in the NHL that year, that's for the 9-game rule, a team can slide your contract to the next year. Right now, the Sharks have 2 players who are eligible to have their contracts slide. We'll just say slide. One, Sam Dickinson, who signed his contract last season. Dickinson, who turned 19 this summer. He had his contract slid once last year because, again, didn't play an NHL game last year. So his contract's already been slid once. He is eligible to have his contract slide again if he plays back in the OHL this year. The other player is Leo Salin-Wallenius, who signed his contract this offseason, and he is 19. Wallenius is going to Wallin Salinius. I really screwed that up. Salim Wallenius is going to spend the entire year over in the SHL, with the Vaho Lakers. They've already started their preseason. He's been playing like top pairing minutes over there. So we're hoping for a big season from him as a guy who can play on one team this year in one league instead of the 4 teams and 4 leagues that we saw from him last year. So those are 2 slide candidates. Michael Misa, if he signs his contract right now, also a slide candidate. So we know, again, assuming Saline, Wallenius Saline, Saline, why am I screwing that up? Assuming Leo Saline Wallenius is going to spend the entire season in SHL, there's one of your slide contracts. That puts you at 50 right now before you sign Michael Misa. So if you do sign Michael Misa, again, his contract won't kick in officially until he plays that 10th game, right? Because, and the same thing with Sam Dickinson. Both those contracts don't kick in until that 10th game. But to get one of those, to fit them in, you're going to have to move someone who's on an NHL contract. And again, that doesn't mean an NHL player, just someone who's on an NHL contract. And if you look, right, you can have, as a reminder, you have 23 players, right, on your NHL roster. All of those guys, of course, with NHL contracts, because you have to have an NHL contract to play in the NHL. But then you look at your AHL team. And right now, the Sharks have a ton of dudes who are on NHL contracts in the AHL. And some of these guys are rookies or, players on their ELCs, right? Cam Lund, ELC guy, Igor Chernyshov, ELC guy, Phil Beested, ELC guy, Quentin Musty, ELC guy, Casper Holton, all those guys, ELC guys, Ethan Cardwell, ELC guy, Oscar Olesen, who the Sharks just acquired, ELC guy, Artem Guriev, who's probably going to, ELC guy, but it's probably going to be in the EHCL. And then Zach Ostapchuk, like all those guys just among the forwards on ELC contracts. And then even on the defense, Noah Beck, Luca Cagnoni, Matthias Havlid, Jake Furlong, and Gannon Larocque. Unfortunately, with Larocque, it looks, who knows, right? But all those guys are on their ELC contracts. So you're not going to get rid of those guys because they're all kind of expected to be part of your future or contribute in some sort of way. So that's where you look at kind of some of these other guys, right? You have Afasaniev, Colin White, Samuel LaBerge, who you just signed this offseason, Shane Bowers, who you just acquired this offseason, Jimmy Huntington, Pavel Regenda, who you re-signed, Patrick Giles, who you acquired last offseason, Lucas Carlson, and Cole Clayton. And all these guys are on NHL contracts, but most likely going to spend the season in the AHL. So what you probably do is you just trade one of those contracts, right? You look at a team who needs, right? Maybe they want some more depth in their AHL team. Hey, we'll send you Shane Bowers for a 2027 6th round pick or something like that. Like that's what it's easy, right? It's not the hardest thing in the world to kind of trade one, and especially for a team like the Barracuda, who honestly probably has too many forwards, right? Last week when I was digging into their players on the team, like trying to make a lineup was tough because like they just have too many guys in the forward department. And like I was doing it and I couldn't even get guys like Van Roboys or Anthony Vincent or some of these guys who were on AHL only contracts who are more than deserving to be in the lineup because of what we saw last year. It was hard to get them in the lineup, like on, in my early projections. So I think you look at one of those guys, right? The Afasanievs, your Shane Bowers, somebody like that. And you look at maybe potentially just trading one of those guys to a team that could use a little bit more AHL depth, right? And pick a team, right? Teams are always looking for those type of guys who can come in, play middle six type of minutes for their AHL team, and just right like the Sharks famously traded for Lane Peterson, a 4th round pick for him a couple of years ago. Granted, they thought he was going to be more of an NHL impact guy, but right. End up spending, has been basically a high-end AHL player since then. Like the Sharks can just swap one of these guys for a late round pick or even a future considerations. Like it doesn't really matter because the goal here is you're opening up a spot for Michael Misa, who's going to have a bigger impact, than whatever, sorry, Shane Bowers or whomever you trade or whatever 6th round pick or whatever value you get back for it. That doesn't matter. You're trying to open up a spot for Michael Misa, who was the second overall pick in this year's draft, so he can play NHL games this year and not just play 9 NHL games. And this could also, right, open up if Sam Dickinson isn't ready and you just send him back to the OHL, and then you don't have to trade anybody. So the holdup right now is nothing. Like, the Sharks could sign Michael Misa to his contract at any point here, but my guess is they're probably going to kind of play the waiting game for a little bit and just kind of see how things go. Or they'll probably just sign him right before like the eve of training camp, sign him to his contract. So let's kind of talk about the Michael Misa plan and what to kind of expect. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. Guys, I'm super excited to tell you about my new favorite jeanswear brand, Doer. I've been living in their performance denim straight fit, and honestly, they've completely changed the game for me. And right now, the timing couldn't be better. Doer's opening a brand new store in Hayes Valley on August 29th. Let me tell you why it's worth making the trip. I've been wearing my Doer jeans to work, running errands, grabbing dinner with my wife, and they never miss. They have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim, so you can get that perfect fit without feeling restricted. Doer combines classic jeanswear style with the comfort and performance of athletic wear without sacrificing style. Doer will be opening a brand new store on Hayes Valley on August 29th. Head on over to 567 Hayes Street and mention my code LOCKEDONSF in the store for 15% off your first order. Or if you're like me and you don't like going places, just go to shopdoer.com/LockedOnSF. That's DUER for 15% off online. Trust me, once you try them, you'll never want to wear anything else. All right, before we finish up, of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no off season. We're still bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter the most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. So what's the plan with Misa, right? It's pretty clear, like, he's going to play in the NHL this year, right? And they could send him back to Saginaw and just say, like, hey, you're not quite ready yet. But the problem is Misa's done everything you could ask for in the OHL, right? Memorial Cup champion, literally the MVP of the CHL, led all of CHL in scoring, was the MVP of the OHL, like, was the best player in junior hockey last season. What's there left for him to prove other than, can I get to 200 points in a year type of thing? And if he went back to Saginaw, like, my guess would be Saginaw would probably trade him to one of the top end teams. Saginaw's lost a bunch of pieces this offseason, including like Chernyshov and Epperson and, Zane Perret. Like, a lot of these they're kind of big pieces. They're kind of in a reload situation here. So if you traded the rights to Michael Misa, who is going to play a full season for you or a majority of the season for you, like, you're going to get a haul for the reigning MVP, and like, would be very prudent for Saginaw to trade him and get what you can. And, that way you can kind of help your rebuild here. So, but again, like, what's he going to go back and do? Like, there's really nothing for him left to do in the OHL. And again, right, can't play in the AHL, and he can't play in, where it seems like it's too late for him to play in college. So he's going to play in the NHL this year. And I think for the plan for Misa is going to be very similar to what we saw with Will Smith last year. And there's going to be a little bit difference, right? Because Will Smith, I think, was, yes, he had a year of college under his belt, but like, that Boston College team was a freaking juggernaut. You had 4 first-round picks easily, right? Between Gabe Perreault, Ryan Leonard, Will Smith, Cutter Gauthier, like that's a lot of top-end talent on that team. And Will Smith and like that team dominated, right? We all watched him. That was a really fun year to watch Boston College and Will Smith and that team just dominate people. But right, we know Will Smith has some growing pains he was going to endure, and we saw the way that the Sharks handled it last season of like, we're going to keep the training wheels on you in the first half of the season. And then when you can kind of prove to us that you're ready to go, we'll go, right? And we saw Will Smith didn't play back-to-back games. He was, had those development days. They played him on the third line. Like, they put him in a situation where he would play like some power play time here, and and like get some opportunities to do stuff there. But for the most part, very like, we're gonna be very kind of careful with your utilization and your deployment until we feel like you're ready to go. And then we saw Will Smith explode in the second half, where he had 30 points in 34 games. And only Macklin Celebrini had more points in that time, and Celebrini had 31 in the same amount of time. With Misa, I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. I think Misa is a cleaner prospect than Will Smith. Even Misa now compared to Will Smith after a year of college, because I think Misa is more impactful in all three zones. Do I think Misa is going to have Macklin Celebrini level of impact this year? No. Like, that's not a fair expectation. Even Celebrini, who, I was extremely high on Celebrini, he did things that many of us didn't think were not possible, but like, he exceeded all of our expectations in year one, right? So for Misa, I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the same Will Smith plan of, we're going to be a little careful, right? No back-to-back games. We're going to, get those development days, as he's still 18, doesn't turn 19 until near the February next year. Want to continue to get your body, closer to being NHL caliber. But the good thing with Misa, right, is he's used to playing more games, the OHL schedule of 68 games in a season, where he's used to playing a much bigger load. Actually, is it now I think it's 72. No, 68. I was right in the first spot. So yeah, 68. But like, most of those games are, right, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They do a lot of back-to-backs and stuff like that. But still, like, and there's, some travel, but nowhere near, of course, what you have in the NHL. So he's kind of maybe a little bit more used to like playing that bigger schedule, like kind of having those, 3 games in a week that you see in the NHL, compared to what you saw from college, like in college, where it's mostly like Friday, Saturday, and then you're off until the next weekend. And again, Misa is just a cleaner prospect in all 3 zones, and his impact in the defensive zone. They're like, if Misa and Will Smith were in the same draft, Misa's getting picked ahead. Like, this is not like some sort of like hot take. If Misa and Will Smith were in the same draft, Misa's getting picked ahead of Will Smith. Misa's just a much cleaner prospect than Will Smith was, and even after a year of college. So I think it's the Will Smith plan, but would you be shocked if by Thanksgiving, the beginning of December, the training wheels come off Misa, because he shows that he can kind of do a little bit more than what we saw from Smith, who took a little bit longer to kind of get his legs under him? So I think that's the plan. I think Michael Misa will sign his. My guess is Michael Misa will sign his ELC on the eve of training camp, right? They will kind of monitor the situation between both Misa and Dickinson on how they feel, who they feel is going to be in the NHL, not just for the 9 games, but for the entire season. And then when you get kind of closer to cut down day and those final rosters, you just trade one of your AHL guys to another team that needs another AHL body. And you get a late round pick for it, right? And whomever it is, etc. I listed kind of my candidates for it, but whoever it is, and then you just kind of clear a contract that way. So while we continue to wait, it would be nice to just kind of like, let's get the plan on here, but I'm not worried about it. I think that's my guess is to the plan for Misa, and we saw it work really, really well for Will Smith. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Misa is kind of making a impact a little bit quicker than Will Smith, but I'm not expecting that like Macklin Celebrini, like type of performance, because Celebrini is a one of a kind type of player. So not to say Misa and Will Smith aren't special players, but Celebrini is just a different dude, and we saw it last year. So anyway, that's gonna be it for me today. We'll be back probably tomorrow as we kind of continue to ramp up here for training camp. So I think we're gonna be talking about kind of the Sharks and what kind of setting expectations for what would make a successful season. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok, kids. Very much Mole Man wearing the hat and the skateboard, cowabunga dudes. Anyway, follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at my fry hole. Until tomorrow. Bye, friends.